First of all, thank you very much for coming to hear my talk today. As you know, yes, my name is Stephen Cooper, and I've been working at G Research now for about 8 years. So I'm probably one of those odd people who's still in their first job. And so for the last 4 years of those, I've started working more in our web apps, our internal web apps that we're doing. And one of the things that has led me to this talk is that you start creating these nice, simple components. It does one thing and one thing alone. And then you come over here and a client says to you, you know that nice component you've made? Well, can you make it do this? So you make a small tweak to it and you do that. And then the next week, another one of your clients says, oh, I like that, but can you make it do this as well? So you think, okay, yeah, I'll just add a little bit more on, and now that client has their request too. And you can see where we're going with this. You know, you're back and forth, and before you know it, that beautiful, simple component you wrote is horrendous. And you've reached this point, which I like to think of as feature request fear. You're now scared to update that component because you don't know which one of your clients you might break. And this is a horrendous position to be in. And I got to this position, and that's when I discovered ngTemplateOutlets. This is nothing that you have to add to your Angular project. It's right there in Angular Common. So you can start using it straight away. And the transformation this gave me is now when a feature request comes in, I'm like, yes, we can do this. Let's make our clients happy. So over the next 25, half an hour, we're going to run through these things. First of all, I'm going to give you a reconstruction and just show you how easy it is to get into this situation where your component gets out of control. And then I'll look to see, can ng content help us? Because we often reach for that as our first tool when we want to customize what's displayed inside our component. But in this case, it's not good enough for us. And that's where ngTemplateOutlet will come to the rescue. And then hopefully once I've convinced you that you should be using it, I'm going to share some tips with you to really hit the ground running. So without further ado, to protect the identity of my clients, I'm going to use two other very important clients of mine. This is client number 1, Ben, and client number 2, Joe. Now, these two clients are quite demanding, and they're quite fickle in what they like, so it fits quite well. So at the moment, client number 1, Ben, he loves sharks. So as I want to foster, this love of web apps, I think, well, I can create an app for him, and we'll create this selector where he can select his favorite shark, and then maybe it will go and show him some interesting facts about it. So before we look at the code, this is just going to be a useful key for the rest of the slides. Anything with an orange border is our parent component, and then everything in the blue border, that code is part of our select component. So we start off with a simple component. We've got our inputs, which are our options, and we've got an output for when you select the shark. And then our template will look something like this. We've got a drop-down, and we're using ng4 to list out all the options. And then our app to use it, we've just got our app selector passed in a list of sharks, and there we go. Client number 2 comes along and says, I've just learned to talk, and I want to talk in Latin. So can you make this selector work so that I can see what the Latin names of the sharks are? So he's like, OK, we can do this. Let's add an input which takes this display function. And using this, we can then update our template. And instead of just displaying the option, we'll wrap it in this display function. And then when we pass in the append Latin function, when we define our component, you'll then see the Latin name displayed. So we're doing all right. And then client number 1 comes along and says, I've just learned how to swim. And I want to know which of my sharks are safe to swim with. And I've actually gone and made my own icon library that I want you to use. At that point, heart sings, how big is this icon library? But we think we need to make him happy, so we'll add this into our component as well. So we'll follow the same route. We'll pass in this function, and we'll need to set it up so that if you don't pass in the function, it's undefined. Because then we can use an ngIf to not display the icon. So this is to make it work for client number 2. But when this function is passed in, it will then give us a result. And we can use that to say whether it's a swimmer, skull, or crossbones, pass that function in, and there we are. Of course, it's safe to swim with an angular shark. That one. But I think we should stop for a minute and take a look at what we've done to our lovely simple component. So where we started off with 1 input, we've now got 3. So say we've added in a select display function as well as our swim icon and our original display function. And then in our ngInclude code, we've had to set up all these different initializations and see how the swim icon isn't undefined, whereas the other 2 are, you're passing the value through. So our component is getting a little bit fragile here as we've added in these extra features. And then to add that onto the problems, client 2 comes to us and says, why is it so slow now? And I was like, well, I was just enjoying my pancake. But then if we think back to our component, what we've done is we've introduced this icon library that client number 1 provided for us to all of our clients. And it turns out it is enormous. So we need to do something about this. And that's where we maybe think, can ng content help us? Maybe we could project this icon into the component. So we're going to update our code. So we'll take the icon out, and instead we'll replace it with ng content. And then we get this. So the icon is only displayed on the last time. And that's because we haven't named this ng content. So even though you think you've put multiple instances of it, there's only the last one that is actually displayed. And also, it's got the wrong icon. Because everything that is displayed within the ng content, you've defined in your parent component, and it has no idea about the context in which it's been displayed. So this hasn't solved the problem for us. But client number 2 is still angry. So maybe now I'm thinking, I'll create a new selector. But no, we don't want to do that. Because say our select component is quite complicated, and then you're duplicating that code, you've got a lot more to maintain. So this isn't what we want to do. To resolve the problem that we've got, there's 2 steps that we need. We need to be able to pass in a generic template into our component. And secondly, we need the component to hydrate that template with its state. And by that, I mean the template knows which shark it's being displayed for. So you know whether you need to apply the skull and crossbones icon or the safe to swim. And guess what? ngTemplateOutlet enables us to do exactly this. So let's have a look at how you can use this. First of all, you need to define your template. So here we're using this ngTemplate directive or element. And we're calling it with our template reference syntax, that's the hash. So you're saying hash my template. So here we have a template, and we can reference it with my template. And then to use that, we use the ngContainer tag. And then you apply the ngTemplateOutlet directive. You can apply this directive to divs or to another template tag, or in this case, we're using an ngContainer, because I find it works quite well, because you're not adding any other elements to your DOM apart from what's inside your template. So you can see my template, where we've referenced it, and then we've passed it into the outlet. Then if we have a look at how this will be rendered, the template itself doesn't get put into your, I guess, the rendered output. It will just be there as a comment. Our orange div with the border, that's the same. But then where we had this ngContainer with the outlet, you'll now see the content of your template displayed there. So we've now got our blue box inside the orange one. Okay. So for our use case, we then need to replicate this. In our parent component, we need to be able to pass it in. So we'll define our ngTemplate within our component, and then we'll use a content child to pick up that reference name. So here, option template. And then in the options, where we're defining where this template is actually going to be rendered, we create our ng container with the template outlet and pass it that reference. Okay, so we've done our first step. So step number 2, we need to hydrate that template with its state. And this is really quite straightforward. There's also ngTemplateOutlet context. And this takes a generic object. In this case, you've also got the implicit thing, which means when you reference this with the let syntax, it will use the default option. So here we're saying, when you render this template, give it this context. So now our template will know which option it's being used for. And then when you define your template, so you can say let shark, and that gives you access, or I guess a control or reference to that option. And then you can run your client functions directly on that object. So we've done step 2. So when he says, why is it so slow? Now we're much happier because we can say, I don't need to create a new component. I can just use ngTemplateOutlet to solve this problem. So where before we had this icon and display function, we'll delete that and we'll put an ngTemplate, well, an ng container there with an ngTemplateOutlet on it. And we'll also give it the context of the, I guess, the option that it's being displayed for. And then instead of passing in these display functions via inputs, we'll provide the template. And also, if you notice, now when we're using this icon, we don't have to worry about the ng if or not. We can just use get the swim icon name, because for client number 1, he always wants to see this. So not only have we extracted this from our select component, the template that we're writing is simpler as well. So client number 2 is happy, his app is back to full speed, and client number 1 is still happy because he's still got his icons. So this is what our final select code looks like. You can see we've got our input, and we've got a content child now to pick up the option reference, as well as our selected output. So you can see we've got rid of all the inputs which aren't actually related to the fact that this is a select component. And you've enabled yourself to customize this in many more ways without ever probably changing this code again. And then if we look at the final template code, you can see it's all very generic. There's nothing specific to client 1 or client 2 use cases here. All we've got is this ng container with a ngTemplateOutlet. So it makes the code really clean, really simple, and also incredibly powerful. So, and then we look at the client code. So client 1, he's using the icon library, and client 2 just has their append Latin function. So here you can see all that customization has been taken out of our select component and just lives with the individual clients. And their select components are both the way they want them. And then client number 1 comes along after you've done all this work and says, I want to pick tractors now. I don't really like sharks anymore. So where previously you would think, oh, I've added all these inputs to be able to specify, his icon library and all of this, no problem. But now we think, no, actually, we've got ngTemplateOutlet. We can easily handle this. So where before he had this template, so he's got my selector and he's defined the shark template. All we need to do now, scrunch that up, throw it away, and put a new template in place. So now this is our tractor template. So we've got a tractor name, image, how many stars it got, and even a button to say, buy now. And there we go. We've got 2 completely different I guess, visual representations of a select component, but under the hood, they're using exactly the same code. And I think this is, when I came across this feature, I was like, this is incredible. How did I not know about this? And you realize it opens up so many possibilities to you, because suddenly you're not scared of a client saying, oh, actually, can you add this extra customization? Because it's just changing the template in their own code. I'm not worried that I'm going to break any other person's use case for this select component. And also, you can be a little bit prouder, in a sense, of that select component itself, because it is completely generic. So hopefully I've convinced you that this is something worthwhile to use. And then here are some things that I found really useful in, I guess, actually working with ngTemplateOutlets. So first of all, let's start off with the default template. Say you've got an existing select component, and you have got a lot of clients using it. You want to be able to extend this select component with an ngTemplateOutlet, but you can't do that and change it in every use case. So what you can actually do is you can define a default template, put your existing behavior in there, and then you can see where we're saying ngTemplateOutlet, we're saying TemplateRef, or if it's not defined, use the default template. So this enables you to maintain exactly the same look and feel for all the existing use cases, but then if you want to extend it further and use a new template, you can now pass that in as the content child and take advantage of that. So this is a really useful way of getting started with extending an existing component with an ngTemplateOutlet. And then it doesn't stop with one template. So we've got a template that we want to use for the select component as well as the option. Well, you can add multiple containers with their own references. So we've got selected template ref and an option template ref. And then with your inputs, you can add content child, which picks up both of those using the correct names. And then define both of them as children with the appropriate syntax or the hash syntax, and they'll be picked up and applied correctly. And you can extend this to as many references as you want. Another way to use templates or to get them into your component is via an input. And what this will allow you to do is you can define like a shared template outside of where you're using your components and then pass that in to both of them at the same time. So in this case, whales and sharks, they might use the same, I guess, template to be displayed. We can define it once and then pass it to both of them. And now if we go back to our context property, so at first we just put the implicit option on it. But you can add any other name properties to this object. But then the way you use it is you can say let shark or let car, and if you're not saying what property to use, it will just default to whatever is implicit in your definition of the context object. But then say you want to add in some extra properties, so here we're going to add in the index in the list for each option. Then you can say let ID equals the index, or you can say let position equal index. So you've got to use the name of that property to extract it. Okay. So you could do something like this, where you've got your template, and then you color the different rows black and blue using those index. An interesting point which often I get asked about this is, can you do type checking on those properties? And this is something which Alex touched on his talk yesterday, that Ivy will probably get us a step closer to being able to do that. With this improved type checking and template type checking, this is something which is going to be, I guess, easier to do and more reliable. So that would be something which would be nice, because it would be nice to be able to say, here's my template reference, and actually, when you say let dash, or equals, you'd get an autocomplete list of the properties that are available. So I'm hoping that we will be able to achieve that. And then finally, testing. Testing these templates is quite straightforward. So what we're going to do here is we're going to test that the default template is used if we don't pass in our own template. And then when we do provide a template, we want to make sure that that is being used to display the output. So we will create our select component and our test host, set that up, and then we'll pass in this list of sharks. So here we're saying test shark, and notice we haven't provided a custom template, and then we're checking for that string test shark. So we can be confident in this case that the default template has been used. And then for the custom case, we can pass in our option template with our custom double bracket shark, and then test for the string custom test shark. And so we've tested that our template has been picked up, and it's using that to render the output. So there's a few things that I've come across which have been, I guess, bonus features of ngTemplateOutlet. So this has all been, I guess, a bit fun with using my children and as our clients. But I ran into this problem with no clients except myself, because I had created this select component to be able to choose between different simulation runs of all the data that we had. And the problem I was having is that the user wanted to add on all these extra features. So we've got this no icon, whether the simulation runs have been archived, whether there were any known problems. And this, what started as that simple select component, just got more and more complicated depending on your most complicated use case. But as soon as we introduced ngTemplateOutlet, all that complexity just went to that one complicated use case. And all the other selectors that we used were nice and simple again. And it also enabled me to make this select component actually truly shareable, put it in an NPM package that we could use locally, within our company. Whereas before, I wasn't happy to make that a shared component because it had these really specific implementations for my use case. So this is something that ngTemplates and ngTemplate contents enable you to do. So if you want to learn a bit more about this, you can go to the Angular docs, or I've created a stack blitz where you can choose your favorite shark or tractor and see this code in action. Because I was like, for me, sometimes it's easy, to forget how you set these things up. So I've created this stack blitz, which will just show you, and you can check for yourself that it is exactly the same selector. So that's all I wanted to tell you today about ngTemplateOutlets, and I hope that you too can really benefit from the power of customization that they will give you. Thank you very much.